Marcus Chen stood at attention in the pristine white briefing room aboard the Galactic Defense Station Omega-7, his plain gray uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial armor worn by the alien officers surrounding him. The massive viewing screen displayed star charts of the contested border regions where the hegemony forces had been making devastating advances against the coalition fleet. Admiral Korath, a towering blue-skinned Altarian with 4 arms and silver combat decorations covering his chest, barely glanced at Marcus as he outlined the mission parameters. His voice carried the typical dismissive tone that Marcus had grown accustomed to during his 3 years of service in the coalition military. The reconnaissance mission to Sector 7G will be led by Commander Zephyr, Korath announced, gesturing to an imposing reptilian Draknari whose scales gleamed like polished emeralds. You will take a standard patrol cruiser and gather intelligence on hegemony troop movements. The mission is classified as low-risk surveillance. Marcus raised his hand slightly. Sir, if I may suggest, the human tactical analysis indicates that Sector 7G has shown unusual energy signatures. It might be wise to— Lieutenant Chen? Korath interrupted, his 4 eyes focusing on Marcus with obvious irritation. Your species has been part of the coalition for barely a decade. Perhaps it would be better to observe and learn from races who have been fighting galactic wars for millennia. A ripple of quiet laughter echoed through the room from the other officers. Commander Zephyr's forked tongue flicked out in what Marcus recognized as the Draknari equivalent of a smirk. Captain Velox, an insectoid Zethran whose compound eyes reflected the briefing room lights, made a clicking sound that translated roughly to amusement. With respect, sir, Marcus continued, keeping his voice steady despite the burning sensation in his chest. Human pattern recognition capabilities are quite advanced. We've identified what appears to be a staging area for a major offensive. Humans, scoffed Captain Thane, a crystalline being whose voice resonated like wind chimes in a storm, always seeing threats where there are none. Your species' paranoid tendencies are well documented. Admiral Korath waved a dismissive hand. The tactical assessment has been completed by our best strategists. Commander Zephyr will follow standard protocols. Lieutenant Chen, you will remain aboard the station and assist with data entry in the communications department. Marcus felt the familiar sting of being relegated to clerical work, while his fellow officers prepared for active duty. It had become a pattern since his assignment to the coalition forces. Despite graduating top of his class from the Terra Military Academy and completing advanced tactical training, he was consistently assigned to support roles that the alien command structure deemed more appropriate for human capabilities. As the briefing concluded and officers filed out to prepare for their missions, Marcus lingered behind, staring at the tactical display. His trained eye immediately picked up the patterns that the coalition strategists had missed. The energy signatures weren't random. They formed a clear defensive perimeter around what could only be a major staging facility. Still here, Chen? Commander Zephyr paused at the doorway, his massive frame blocking most of the light from the corridor. Don't worry, we'll handle the real soldiers' work while you play with your computer terminals. Commander, Marcus said quietly, I really think you should reconsider the mission parameters. Those energy readings suggest— Listen carefully, human. Zephyr stepped closer, his reptilian features twisted into a predatory grin. Your species might have some useful manufacturing capabilities, but warfare requires instincts that take millions of years of evolution to develop. The Draknari have been warriors since before your ancestors crawled out of their caves. Marcus watched the commander leave, then turned back to the star charts. He had learned long ago that arguing with superior officers was futile, but that didn't stop him from analyzing every piece of data he could access. While his official duties kept him buried in communication logs and supply requisitions, Marcus spent his off hours studying hegemony tactics and movement patterns. The communications department was located in the lower sections of the station, far from the command centers where real decisions were made. Marcus shared the space with three other junior officers. Lieutenant Yara, a young Altarian who had been assigned to the department for asking too many questions during tactical meetings. Ensign Blix, a nervous Zethran whose compound eyes darted constantly between multiple screens, and Warrant Officer Grom, a stocky, brown-furred being from the Ursine Collective who rarely spoke but possessed an incredible talent for intercepting enemy transmissions. Another exciting day of filing incident reports, Yara muttered as she settled into her workstation. Her blue skin had a slightly darker shade than Admiral Korath's, indicating her lower social status within Altarian society. I heard Zephyr's team deployed this morning for the Sector 7G reconnaissance. Standard patrol route, Blix clicked nervously. Should be routine surveillance. Nothing exciting ever happens in that sector. Marcus pulled up the morning intelligence reports on his terminal, scanning through the usual collection of shipping lane updates and minor skirmishes along the outer rim. But buried in the routine communications traffic, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A series of encrypted hegemony transmissions had been intercepted by Coalition listening posts, and while the encryption remained unbroken, the transmission patterns told a story that chilled him to the bone. "Grom," Marcus called to the Ursine officer. "Can you take a look at these transmission logs? I'm seeing something unusual." The bear-like alien lumbered over to Marcus's workstation, his dark eyes scanning the data streams. After several minutes of analysis, Grom's expression grew serious. "Multiple fleet command signatures," he rumbled in his deep voice. "Coordination protocols for large-scale operations. This is not routine communication traffic." "That's what I was afraid of," Marcus said, pulling up additional sensor data from the border monitoring stations. "Look at these energy signatures from Sector 7G over the past week. They're not random defensive positions. They're setting up for a major push into Coalition space." Yara leaned over to examine the data, her forearms working rapidly across multiple input devices. "If this analysis is correct, Commander Zephyr's patrol is flying directly into the largest hegemony battle fleet assembled in this sector. We need to warn them." Blix's antennae twitched with anxiety. "The commander's ship won't stand a chance against a full battle group." Marcus was already reaching for the communication controls when Lieutenant Korvac, their department supervisor, emerged from his office. The tall, pale Valdorian's elongated skull gleamed under the artificial lighting as he noticed the gathering around Marcus's workstation. "What is the meaning of this disruption?" Korvac's voice carried the typical authoritative tone of a species that considered itself intellectually superior to most others in the Coalition. "You are supposed to be processing routine communications, not conducting unauthorized intelligence analysis." "Sir," Marcus stood at attention, "we've identified what appears to be a major hegemony offensive being prepared in Sector 7G. Commander Zephyr's patrol is in immediate danger." Korvac's pale eyes examined the data briefly before dismissing it with a wave of his long, thin hand. "Human pattern recognition is notoriously unreliable when applied to military intelligence. Your species sees threats and conspiracies everywhere because of your primitive evolutionary background. The tactical assessment for Sector 7G was completed by experienced Coalition strategists. But, sir, the transmission patterns clearly indicate—" "Lieutenant Chen," Korvac's voice turned cold. "You are a communications technician, not a tactical analyst. Return to your assigned duties immediately, and do not waste department resources on amateur intelligence gathering." Marcus felt the familiar frustration building in his chest, but he had learned that direct confrontation with superior officers only resulted in formal reprimands and further restrictions on his duties. Instead, he returned to his workstation and began the tedious process of cataloging routine supply requests while his mind raced through possible alternatives. As the day progressed, more intelligence data filtered through the communication networks. Each new piece of information confirmed Marcus's growing certainty that a massive hegemony offensive was imminent. The energy signatures, transmission patterns, and fleet movements all pointed to a coordinated attack that would overwhelm the scattered coalition patrol vessels in the border regions. Chen, Grom's deep voice interrupted his thoughts. New transmission intercepts from hegemony command channels. Multiple fleet commanders receiving final operational orders. Marcus quickly accessed the new data, his heart sinking as he recognized the coordination patterns. They're moving tonight. This isn't just a staging operation. It's the opening move of a major campaign. We have to do something, Yara said urgently. Commander Zephyr's team has been out of communication for 6 hours. If they're caught in the middle of a fleet deployment... Lieutenant Korvac has made his position clear. Blix clicked nervously. We cannot act without authorization from the command structure. Marcus stared at the tactical display, watching as the pieces of the hegemony offensive fell into place. In a few hours, Commander Zephyr's patrol vessel would stumble into the largest enemy battle fleet assembled in this sector. The coalition forces would be caught completely off guard, and the resulting massacre would open a clear path for the hegemony to strike deep into coalition territory. The rational part of his mind told him to follow orders, file the appropriate reports through proper channels, and let the command structure make the critical decisions. But Marcus had joined the coalition military to protect humanity's newfound place among the galactic community, not to watch helplessly while preventable disasters unfolded. He thought about his sister Elena, who worked as a teacher in the human colony on New Geneva, just 3 jumps from the border regions. He thought about the millions of humans and other coalition citizens who would suffer if the hegemony breakthrough succeeded. And he thought about the dismissive laughter of the alien officers who had spent 3 years treating him like an incompetent child. I'm going to stop this, Marcus said quietly, his fingers moving across his workstation controls with practiced efficiency. Chen, what are you doing? Yara's voice carried a note of alarm. What someone should have done hours ago, Marcus replied, accessing the emergency communication protocols that could reach any coalition vessel within the sector. I'm warning Zephyr's team about what they're flying into. You don't have authorization for emergency broadcasts. Blix's compound eyes widened in panic. Lieutenant Korvac will have you court-martialed. Probably, Marcus agreed, his fingers hovering over the transmission controls. But if I'm right about this offensive, a court-martial will be the least of our problems. The communication system chimed as Marcus initiated the emergency broadcast sequence. In a few moments, every coalition vessel in the sector would receive a priority alert that could not be ignored or dismissed. His career in the coalition military would likely end within the hour. But Marcus had already made his choice. Commander Zephyr's voice crackled through the communication channel just as Marcus finished encoding the tactical analysis into the emergency transmission. The Draknari commander sounded irritated and dismissive as usual. Omega-7 Station. This is Patrol Group Delta, requesting clarification on unauthorized emergency broadcast. We are detecting no hostile activity in our operational area. Marcus keyed the microphone, knowing that this transmission would be recorded and reviewed by every senior officer in the coalition command structure. His voice remained calm and professional despite the magnitude of what he was about to say. Commander Zephyr, this is Lieutenant Chen aboard Omega-7. Based on intercepted communications and energy signature analysis, you are approaching a major hegemony staging area. I strongly recommend immediate withdrawal and requesting fleet support. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity before Zephyr's harsh laughter filled the communication channel. Lieutenant Chen, I am ordering you to cease unauthorized transmissions immediately. Your human paranoia is not grounds for disrupting a routine patrol mission. Commander, please review the tactical data I'm transmitting. The energy signatures clearly indicate... Enough! Zephyr's voice carried a dangerous edge. "When I return to the station, you will face formal charges for insubordination and misuse of emergency communication protocols." The channel went silent as Commander Zephyr cut the transmission, leaving Marcus staring at the tactical display that continued to show hegemony forces moving into position for their surprise attack. Lieutenant Korvac's office door slammed open as the Valdorian supervisor stormed toward Marcus's workstation, his pale features twisted with rage. "Lieutenant Chen, you are hereby relieved of duty pending a formal investigation into your gross violation of communication protocols," Korvac's voice echoed through the department. "Security personnel are being summoned to escort you to the detention center." Marcus remained seated at his workstation, his eyes fixed on the sensor data that showed Commander Zephyr's patrol vessel continuing its approach toward the hegemony staging area. In approximately 20 minutes, the Draknari commander would learn whether human pattern recognition was as unreliable as everyone claimed. As the security team arrived to escort him away, Marcus took one last look at the tactical display. The hegemony forces were moving into their final positions, and somewhere in the darkness of space, Commander Zephyr's small patrol vessel was flying directly into the jaws of the largest enemy offensive the Coalition had seen in decades. The detention center aboard Omega-7 station was a sterile white room equipped with basic furnishings and a small viewing port that looked out into the star field. Marcus sat on the narrow bunk, watching the distant stars and wondering if he had just destroyed his military career for nothing. Perhaps the alien officers were right about human paranoia and pattern recognition errors. 18 minutes after his arrest, the station's emergency klaxons began to wail. The detention center door burst open as the emergency klaxons continued their deafening wail throughout Omega-7 station. Admiral Korath stood in the doorway, his forearms working frantically with a portable command tablet, while his blue face showed an expression Marcus had never seen before: genuine fear. "Chen, you need to come with me immediately," the Admiral said, his usual dismissive tone replaced by urgent desperation. "We have a situation." Marcus rose from the bunk, confused by the sudden reversal in his circumstances. "Sir, I'm currently under arrest for—" "The charges have been dropped," Korath interrupted, already heading back down the corridor. "Commander Zephyr's patrol encountered the largest hegemony battle fleet we've seen in this sector. They barely escaped with their lives, and now we're facing a full-scale invasion." The command center was in chaos when Marcus arrived. Officers from dozens of different species worked frantically at their stations, while tactical displays showed red enemy markers spreading across the border regions like a deadly infection. The viewing screens displayed real-time footage from surveillance drones showing massive hegemony dreadnoughts emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. Commander Zephyr stood near the central command table, his reptilian features pale and shaken. The proud Draknari warrior who had dismissed Marcus hours earlier now looked like he had seen death itself approaching. His uniform showed scorch marks from what must have been a desperate escape from overwhelming enemy forces. "Report, Commander," Admiral Korath ordered as he took his position at the command table. "Sir," Zephyr's voice carried none of its earlier arrogance, "we dropped out of hyperspace directly into the middle of a hegemony staging area. At least 40 capital ships, including 3 dreadnought-class vessels that we've never encountered before. They were waiting for us." "How did they know our patrol route?" Captain Velox clicked nervously, her compound eyes reflecting the red warning lights that bathed the command center. "They didn't," Admiral Korath said grimly. "They were preparing for a major offensive. Lieutenant Chen's analysis was completely accurate." The admission hung in the air like a physical weight as every officer in the command center turned to look at Marcus. The same aliens who had laughed at his tactical assessment just hours before now stared at him with expressions ranging from surprise to grudging respect. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "if I may suggest, We need to immediately recall all patrol vessels from the border regions and establish defensive positions at the hyperspace choke points. The hegemony strategy appears to be a three-pronged attack designed to split our forces. Three-pronged? Captain Thane's crystalline voice resonated with skepticism. Our intelligence indicates a single battle fleet in Sector 7G. Marcus moved to the tactical display, his fingers working quickly to overlay his analysis onto the strategic map. The fleet in 7G is the primary assault force, but if you examine the communication intercepts from sectors 5F and 9H, you'll see coordination patterns indicating secondary forces preparing to strike simultaneously. Admiral Korath studied the display as Marcus highlighted the relevant data patterns. The communication timestamps, energy signatures, and fleet movement indicators all pointed to a coordinated offensive across multiple sectors designed to stretch coalition forces beyond their ability to respond effectively. "This is impossible," Captain Thane protested. "The hegemony has never demonstrated this level of strategic coordination. Their previous attacks have been straightforward frontal assaults." "With respect, sir," Marcus replied, "the hegemony has been observing coalition tactical responses for years. They've adapted their strategy to exploit our weaknesses." Commander Zephyr stepped forward, his reptilian features showing something Marcus had never expected to see: humility. "Lieutenant Chen, your warning transmission saved my patrol. Without it, we would have been destroyed before we could report the enemy presence." "Commander," Admiral Korath turned to Zephyr, "what's the current status of hegemony forces in Sector 7G? "They're moving fast, sir. The main battle fleet will reach the Kepler Junction within 6 hours. If they control that hyperspace nexus, they'll have direct access to 12 coalition systems, including the industrial centers at New Geneva and Altair Prime." The weight of the situation settled over the command center like a suffocating blanket. The Kepler Junction was one of the most strategically important positions in coalition space, a natural hyperspace nexus that connected multiple star systems. If the hegemony captured it, they could strike deep into the heart of coalition territory while coalition forces remained scattered across the border regions. "Sir," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the worried murmur of conversation, "we have a window of opportunity. The hegemony forces are powerful but overextended. If we can coordinate a concentrated counterattack at the Kepler Junction, we might be able to stop the primary assault force." "With what ships?" Captain Velox clicked anxiously. "Our battle fleet is scattered across 4 sectors on routine patrols. Even if we recalled every vessel immediately, we couldn't assemble enough firepower to challenge a hegemony dreadnought force." "Actually, we can," Marcus said, pulling up the coalition fleet deployment records. "There are 16 vessels within striking distance of Kepler Junction, including 3 heavy cruisers and the carrier Vigilant. The problem isn't firepower, it's coordination." Admiral Korath examined the deployment data with growing interest. "Explain your tactical assessment, Lieutenant." "The hegemony strategy relies on overwhelming local defenses before coalition forces can respond effectively," Marcus said, manipulating the tactical display to show fleet movement patterns. "They expect us to react defensively, pulling back to protect major population centers. But if we strike hard and fast at their main battle fleet while they're still deploying, we can disrupt their entire offensive." "The risk is enormous," Captain Thane pointed out. "If we commit our available forces to a single engagement and fail, the hegemony will have a clear path to the core systems." "If we don't take the risk," Marcus replied, "they'll achieve the same result through systematic conquest. The difference is that a concentrated attack gives us a chance to succeed." Commander Zephyr studied the tactical display intently, his reptilian mind processing the strategic implications. "Lieutenant, how do you propose to coordinate 16 ships from different commands into an effective strike force in less than 6 hours?" "We use the coalition's greatest tactical advantage," Marcus said with growing confidence. "Our diversity. Hegemony forces are trained for standardized responses. but coalition fleets can adapt and improvise in ways that their tactical computers can't predict. The command center fell silent as the assembled officers considered Marcus's proposal. The young human who had been dismissed as paranoid and incompetent was now offering a strategy that could determine the fate of the coalition's war effort. "Admiral," a new voice interrupted the tactical discussion as Captain Rivera, the commanding officer of the human cruiser Defiance, appeared on the main communication screen. "We've received reports of massive hegemony fleet movements. My ship is currently 3 hours from the Kepler Junction. What are your orders?" Admiral Korath looked at Marcus for a long moment before making his decision. "Captain Rivera, you are hereby designated as Tactical Coordinator for Operation Counterstrike. Lieutenant Chen will provide strategic analysis and coordination protocols." "Understood, sir." Rivera's voice carried surprise but no hesitation. "We're ready to implement whatever plan the lieutenant recommends." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as he realized that the dismissive treatment he had endured for years was about to be replaced by something far more challenging, the expectation that he could deliver on his tactical analysis when the stakes couldn't be higher. "Captain Rivera," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was proposing, "I'm transmitting a coordination protocol that will allow our scattered forces to function as a unified strike group. The key is to use our ship's different capabilities in sequence rather than trying to match the hegemony in a direct slugging match." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus worked with the assembled captains to develop a tactical plan that would have been impossible for any single species to execute. The Altarian ships would provide long-range fire support with their advanced energy weapons. The Draknari vessels would lead close-quarters assault actions using their superior armor and aggressive tactics. The insectoid Zethran ships would coordinate electronic warfare and communications, while human vessels would serve as mobile command platforms and tactical coordinators. As the plan took shape, Marcus found himself working directly with some of the most experienced commanders in the Coalition fleet. Captain Tavora of the Altarian heavy cruiser Starblade offered tactical insights based on decades of combat experience. Commander Kresh of the Draknari battleship Ironjaw provided expertise in close-quarters combat against hegemony armor configurations. "Lieutenant," Captain Rivera's voice carried a note of concern as the final coordination protocols were established, "are you certain this approach will work? We're asking every ship captain to execute maneuvers they've never attempted in coordination with species they may have never worked with before." "Captain," Marcus replied, studying the real-time positions of coalition and hegemony forces, "the beauty of this plan is that it doesn't require perfect execution. It requires adaptation and improvisation, which are exactly the qualities that make coalition forces superior to hegemony standardization." Admiral Korath moved to stand beside Marcus at the tactical display. "Lieutenant, I owe you an apology. Your analysis has proven accurate, and your tactical planning is impressive." "Thank you, sir," Marcus said quietly. "But we haven't won anything yet. The real test comes when our ships engage the hegemony battle fleet." The next hour passed in tense preparation as coalition vessels across the border regions received new orders and began converging on the Kepler Junction. Marcus monitored communication channels, coordinate the complex timing required to bring 16 ships from different locations into a synchronized attack formation. Commander Zephyr approached Marcus's workstation, his reptilian features showing an expression the human had never seen before: respect. "Lieutenant, I want to formally apologize for my earlier behavior. Your tactical abilities are extraordinary." "Commander," Marcus replied without looking away from his displays, "I appreciate that, but right now I'm more concerned with making sure this plan actually works." "About that," Zephyr lowered his voice, "there's something you should know. The hegemony fleet includes those new Dreadnought-class vessels I mentioned. Our intelligence suggests they're equipped with weapon systems we've never encountered before." Marcus felt a chill of concern as he pulled up the reconnaissance data from Zephyr's patrol. The images showed hegemony warships that were larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Coalition's tactical databases. If the enemy had developed new technologies, his entire tactical plan might be based on outdated assumptions. "How new are we talking about?" Marcus asked, studying the sensor data from the encounter. "Completely unknown," Zephyr replied grimly. "Their energy signatures don't match anything in our weapons classification system. We could be flying into a massacre." Marcus stared at the tactical display showing Coalition forces moving into position for an attack against an enemy fleet equipped with unknown weapons. Everything he had learned about military strategy suggested that engaging an enemy with superior technology was a recipe for disaster. But as he watched the red markers representing hegemony forces advancing toward Coalition space, Marcus realized that they had already passed the point where retreat was a viable option. The enemy was counting on Coalition forces to react defensively, to pull back and attempt to protect their core systems from a position of weakness. "Commander," Marcus said, his voice filled with quiet determination, "unknown weapons can be a disadvantage for the hegemony as well as for us. If their crews aren't experienced with new systems, they might not be able to use them effectively under combat conditions." "That's a significant gamble," Zephyr pointed out. "Everything about this operation is a gamble," Marcus replied, watching as the last Coalition ships moved into position. "But it's a gamble we can win if we execute the plan correctly." The communication board chimed as Captain Rivera's voice filled the command center. "All ships report ready for Operation Counterstrike, awaiting final authorization." Admiral Korath looked at Marcus one more time, his four arms moving in what Marcus had learned was the Alterian gesture of respect. "Lieutenant Chen, as the tactical coordinator for this operation, the final decision is yours." Marcus felt the eyes of every officer in the command center focused on him as he reached for the communication controls. Somewhere in the darkness of space, 16 Coalition ships waited for his order to engage the largest enemy force any of them had ever faced. His finger hovered over the transmission key as he thought about all the moments of dismissal and condescension he had endured over the past 3 years. He thought about the alien officers who had treated human tactical abilities as inferior and primitive. But mostly he thought about the millions of Coalition citizens whose lives depended on the success of an operation that everyone had said was impossible. "All ships?" Marcus said into the communication channel, his voice carrying across the Coalition fleet. "Commence Operation Counterstrike. Show them what coordination really means." The battle began at 1427 Coalition Standard Time, when the first wave of Alterian heavy cruisers dropped out of hyperspace at maximum range from the hegemony battle fleet. Marcus watched from the command center as Captain Tavora's Starblade and 2 sister ships opened fire with their advanced energy weapons, sending brilliant streams of coherent plasma across the void toward the enemy formation. The hegemony response was immediate and devastating. The 3 unknown Dreadnought-class vessels that Commander Zephyr had encountered unleashed weapons that defied every tactical assumption in the Coalition database. Instead of conventional energy beams or projectile weapons, they fired what appeared to be controlled gravity distortions that warped space itself around their targets. "Starblade is reporting severe structural damage," Lieutenant Yara announced from her communication station. "Their hull is being compressed by some kind of gravitational field weapon." Marcus watched the tactical display with growing alarm as the Alterian cruiser's icon flickered between green and red status indicators. The enemy's new weapons were proving even more dangerous than he had feared, capable of damaging ships without requiring direct hits by manipulating the fabric of space around their targets. "All ships, implement evasive pattern Delta," Marcus ordered into the fleet communication channel. "Do not maintain fixed positions. These weapons appear to require targeting locks to create gravitational effects." The second phase of the attack began as the Draknari battleships led by Commander Kresh's Ironjaw emerged from hyperspace directly behind the hegemony formation. The reptilian warriors had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission, using their ship's superior armor to engage the enemy at close range, while the rest of the fleet maintained distance. "This is Ironjaw." Commander Kresh's voice crackled through the communication system. "Beginning close assault run on enemy capital ships. Their new weapons are less effective at short range." Marcus felt a surge of relief as he realized that his tactical intuition had been correct. The gravity distortion weapons appeared to require time and distance to build up their warping effects, making them less dangerous in close-quarters combat, where traditional weapons and armor still determined the outcome. "Zethran electronic warfare ships, begin jamming protocols," Marcus ordered. "Disrupt their targeting systems while the Draknari close the distance." Captain Velox's response came immediately as her compound eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. "Initiating full-spectrum electronic countermeasures. Enemy communication networks are experiencing significant interference." The battle evolved into a complex dance of coordinated attacks as each coalition species contributed their unique capabilities to the overall strategy. The insectoid Zethran ships used their advanced electronic warfare systems to create false sensor readings and communication dead zones. The crystalline beings from the Thane Collective deployed their ship's natural resonance abilities to disrupt enemy shield harmonics. But it was the human vessels that surprised everyone, including Marcus himself. Captain Rivera's Defiance and the other human ships began executing maneuvers that no single species fleet could have attempted, coordinating the actions of the entire strike force through rapid adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. "Unknown contacts emerging from hyperspace," Ensign Blix announced, his antennae twitching with anxiety. "Multiple hegemony reinforcement groups arriving ahead of schedule." Marcus felt his heart sink as new red markers appeared on the tactical display. The enemy force was already overwhelming, and additional reinforcements would turn the battle into a massacre. His carefully coordinated attack plan was beginning to fall apart as the hegemony demonstrated their own capacity for tactical adaptation. "Sir?" Commander Zephyr's voice carried urgency as his own ship joined the close-quarters battle. "We're detecting massive energy buildups from the dreadnought vessels. They appear to be preparing some kind of superweapon." The tactical display showed ominous energy readings building within the three largest enemy ships as they moved into a triangular formation at the center of their battle fleet. Whatever they were preparing, Marcus realized it would likely be powerful enough to destroy multiple coalition vessels simultaneously. "All ships, execute emergency scatter pattern," Marcus ordered. But he knew that dispersing the fleet would eliminate their coordination advantage and leave each vessel vulnerable to being picked off individually. It was at that moment, when the battle seemed lost and the enemy was preparing to unleash weapons beyond coalition comprehension, that Marcus made a decision that would earn him a codename whispered with both fear and respect throughout the galaxy. "Defiance, this is Omega-7, Marcus said into the communication channel, his voice carrying a calm certainty that belied the desperate situation. "I'm taking direct tactical control of the operation. All ships are to follow my explicit commands without question." "Understood, Omega-7, Captain Rivera replied without hesitation. "What do you need us to do?" Marcus studied the tactical display, his mind processing the positions, capabilities, and vulnerabilities of every ship in both fleets. The solution he saw was so audacious that any rational military strategist would have dismissed it as suicide, but Marcus had learned that human tactical thinking often succeeded precisely because it appeared irrational to more conventional minds. "All ships, form up on the Defiance," Marcus commanded. "We're going to ram the dreadnought formation." The silence that followed his order was broken by Commander Zephyr's incredulous voice. Chen, that's insane. Our ships can't survive a direct collision with Dreadnought-class vessels. We're not going to collide with them, Marcus replied, manipulating the tactical display to show his intended approach vector. We're going to use their own gravity weapons against them. Over the next 60 seconds, Marcus explained a plan so complex and dangerous that it required split-second timing and absolute trust between species who had never worked together in such close coordination. The Coalition fleet would approach the Dreadnought formation in a tight spiral pattern, using the enemy's own gravity distortion weapons to slingshot around the massive vessels and deliver devastating close-range attacks to their most vulnerable systems. This maneuver has never been attempted, Captain Tavora protested from the damaged Starblade. The gravitational stresses could tear our ships apart. Captain, Marcus said quietly, conventional tactics aren't going to win this battle. The hegemony has superior firepower and better technology. Our only advantage is our ability to do things they don't expect. The final phase of the battle began as 16 Coalition vessels formed up in the tightest attack formation ever attempted by a multi-species fleet. Marcus provided real-time navigation coordinates as the ships spiraled inward toward the three dreadnoughts, using the enemy's gravity weapons like cosmic slingshots to build up incredible velocity while remaining too close for the larger vessels to target effectively. Gravitational stresses approaching critical levels, reported Commander Kresh, as the Iron Jaw led the spiral approach. Hull integrity at 60% and falling. Hold formation, Marcus ordered, watching the precise timing required for his plan to succeed. Weapons free in 15 seconds. The Coalition ships burst through the gravity distortion fields like bullets emerging from a rifle barrel, their accumulated velocity carrying them past the Dreadnought formation faster than the enemy's targeting systems could track. But Marcus had calculated more than just an escape trajectory. He had positioned each ship to deliver maximum damage to critical systems during the brief moment when they would be closest to their targets. The coordinated attack struck all three dreadnoughts simultaneously, targeting their weapon systems, shield generators, and command centers with surgical precision. The massive enemy vessels, designed to dominate conventional fleet engagements, found themselves crippled by an attack pattern that exploited their own gravitational weapons against them. Direct hits on all primary targets, Captain Velox reported, her electronic warfare systems providing real-time damage assessment. Enemy superweapon systems are offline. Their main battle fleet is breaking formation. But Marcus wasn't finished. As the Coalition ships completed their slingshot maneuver and reformed at the edge of the battle zone, he was already planning the next phase of an attack that would become legendary throughout Coalition space. All ships prepare for sequential strike patterns, Marcus commanded. We're going to use their confusion against them. Over the next hour, Marcus coordinated a series of attacks that seemed to defy every principle of conventional space warfare. Coalition ships appeared and disappeared throughout the battle zone, striking enemy vessels with perfect timing and coordination before vanishing into hyperspace jumps calculated down to the millisecond. The hegemony fleet, accustomed to fighting predictable enemies with standardized tactics, found themselves facing an opponent that seemed to anticipate their every move while executing maneuvers that their tactical computers couldn't analyze or counter. Enemy fleet is in full retreat, Commander Zephyr reported, his voice filled with amazement. They're abandoning their assault formation and withdrawing from Coalition space. The command center erupted in cheers as the tactical display showed red enemy markers disappearing from the border regions. The largest hegemony offensive in decades had been stopped cold by a coordinated counterattack that military historians would study for generations to come. Admiral Korath approached Marcus's workstation, his four arms moving in the most respectful Alterian gesture possible. Lieutenant Chen, what you accomplished today was nothing short of miraculous. How did you know that such an unconventional approach would succeed? Marcus looked around the command center at the alien officers who had spent years dismissing human tactical capabilities as inferior and primitive. Their faces now showed expressions of genuine respect, and in some cases, barely concealed awe. "Sir," Marcus replied quietly, "human military thinking works differently than most species. We don't just analyze patterns. We create new patterns when the old ones don't work." "The hegemony will remember this battle." Captain Thane's crystalline voice resonated with something approaching reverence. "They've never faced coordination like what you demonstrated today." "Actually," Marcus said, pulling up the strategic analysis from the engagement, "I think they'll remember something else. They'll remember that the Coalition has a weapon they can't counter or predict." "What weapon is that?" Admiral Korath asked. "Adaptation," Marcus replied. "Every time they develop new technology or tactics, we can adapt faster than they can. That's what makes the Coalition dangerous, not our ships or weapons, but our ability to work together in ways that no single species could achieve." Over the following weeks, reports of the battle at Kepler Junction spread throughout Coalition space and beyond. The human lieutenant who had been dismissed as paranoid and incompetent became known by a new designation that enemy forces learned to fear: Reaper. The codename reflected his ability to appear anywhere on a battlefield and coordinate attacks that seemed to come from nowhere while leaving enemy formations devastated in their wake. But Marcus never forgot the lesson of those early years when alien officers had dismissed human capabilities without understanding what they were rejecting. In his subsequent battles and campaigns, he made sure that every species in the Coalition understood that their greatest strength came not from any single tactical doctrine or technological advantage, but from their ability to combine different approaches into something greater than the sum of its parts. The hegemony never again attempted a major offensive against Coalition space. Intelligence reports suggested that their military leadership had concluded that fighting an enemy capable of the coordination demonstrated at Kepler Junction was simply too costly to pursue. They had learned, perhaps too late, that dismissing the capabilities of any Coalition species was a mistake they could not afford to make. Marcus Chen, the human officer who had been relegated to communications duty because aliens thought his species was too paranoid and primitive for real military service, had become the tactical coordinator for the most effective multi-species fleet in galactic history. The codename Reaper would be whispered with respect and fear throughout the galaxy, but Marcus always remembered that his greatest victory had been proving that being different wasn't a weakness. It was the foundation of Coalition strength. And in the quiet moments between battles, when he looked out at the stars that now remained safe because of coordination and adaptation rather than superior firepower, Marcus sometimes smiled at the memory of alien officers who had learned the hard way that dismissing humans was the first step toward their own defeat.